Blessing. Oh. By the way, that's my father-in-law. If you didn't know, good morning. Y'all good? Everybody awoke? That's not a word. Is everybody awake? Yes. Good. This morning we will be in the book of. Y'all could sound a little more excited when you said that. I mean, because me and Meg were talking last night, and she said, "You know what? Could we kind of take a break from Acts for a little while?" And really, about a third of the way through the book, we did take a break for Christmas, and we took about a 4-week break. So we might, after we get to about chapter 20, we might take about a 3-week break and do some standalone sermons and then finish this up about maybe Christmas. This has been one of the longest series I've ever taught. And we started it back last June. And it's been amazing, but to walk through verse by verse through this entire book. If you have your Bibles, turn in the book of Acts to chapter 19 today. And if you weren't with us last week, I do want to catch you up a little bit because you missed what I'd like to call probably one of the coolest, strangest exchanges that you read in the scriptures. Any of you ever watched True TV? Like that section that we covered last week would have been on True TV. You know, not reality, but actuality. Because there were several characters in this story that we read last week that you just really can't believe it. There were people that were actually called itinerant Jewish exorcists. So you see the Robert Shannara or Alexander Shannara signs everywhere. Y'all never seen them? Okay. You would have seen these signs that said exorcisms for sale. I mean, and there were Jewish exorcists and they were itinerant. I mean, they traveled and did this. But as the gospel was exploding in Ephesus and many things were going it was amazing. And what happened is these guys tried to go in and cure a little demon-possessed boy. And it didn't go well, did it? That was where the True TV part come in. They go in to handle what they get paid to do, and they all come running out of the house with no clothes on, just covered with bruises. Because they look at the demon and say, I adjure you. I ask you politely, by the name of Jesus, who Paul preaches, would you mind coming out? And the demon just looks at him and says, yeah, I know Jesus. And I'm familiar with Paul too, but one question. And that was the question that we asked. Never want to walk up to a demon-possessed person and have that person say, who are you? That is, things are about to go bad. And that's exactly what happened. And not to make light of that story, because it is one of the funniest stories that you read about in the Bible. It will tell you a lot about try not to jump into something that God didn't tell you to do. Yeah. It could go really bad really quick for you. But the wonderful thing is, even though this happened, even though these itinerant Jewish exorcists get beat up, skin up, and ran out of the house, God still gets the glory. And we just know that fear came over the whole area because people saw how really powerful God was in this movement called the church in Ephesus. It's incredible. So where we're going to pick up today, not in Proverbs, Acts. Where we're going to pick up today is in verse 21. And this is going to be heavy text-wise. I want to read some. We're not going to do a whole lot of talking until the end. So just kind of follow with me as we go, okay? If there was a title that I could add for today's message, it would be simply this: Clear the Stage. I'll explain that later. Acts chapter 19, starting in verse 21. Now, after these events, now, you see why I told the story about the 7 sons of Sceva, what we talked about last week, because right here's where it picks up. Now, after these events, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia and to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. And having sent into Macedonia 2 of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, he himself stayed in Asia for a while. Let's go to the next verse. About that time there arose no little disturbance. That doesn't mean like just, you know what no little disturbance means, right? It was disturbing, okay? Because it was not a little disturbance, this was a big disturbance. No little disturbance concerning the way. These are the followers of Christ. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought no little business to the craftsmen. These he gathered together with the workmen in similar trades and said, men, you know that from this business we have our wealth. And you see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying, y'all read this next part with me, saying that gods made with hands are not gods. Do y'all believe that? This is really crazy that they would have even gotten to this place. Because here was the thing, they would build something. I don't know what they would build. They would build like a lamp. You love lamp? Okay. I saw by the room, not many people got that. But they would build these things with their hands to worship. And what they were saying is, this Paul's running around saying that these gods that we make with our hands aren't gods. That's going to be bad for business. Because if Paul is telling almost everybody, not just in the city, but everybody in the district, in this area, in this providence, that these are not gods, we're in trouble. But it seems like they could have sat down and thought about it for a moment and say, how can I worship something that I make? Nah, we'll get there. And there's danger not only that this trade of ours may come into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing. And that she may even be deposed from her magnificence. She whom all Asia and the world worship. Hey guys, because of this gospel, we're in trouble now. I haven't sat down to think that what I'm making cannot take care of me. These things that we make and sell to people, we're actually selling these to people, telling them that their life's going to be better because of something that we made and gave to them. How can you convince anybody that something you creates things? Pretty tough sell, huh? But they're kind of in a pickle. Because not only this, but this goddess Artemis, most of you would be familiar with the term Diana. She was very large and in charge in this district in Ephesus. And what we said last week was the temple of Artemis or Diana was what we would comparatively say nowadays would be equal to the Taj Mahal. Like, this was a beautiful place to go, and it held a lot of esteem and it held a lot of weight. And now Because Paul is saying these gods made with hands aren't gods at all. It's creating a problem for the temple worship in the greatest temple mecca around. Are you following me? So, guys, we got an issue. Because not only is our sales going down on the trinkets and the toys and the little items of worship, but actually nobody's wanting to go to the temple either. And what happens if our God loses her sway? At some point, these people should have backed up and looked at the situation and said, maybe we're worshiping the wrong thing. If I have to worry about my God being in disrepute or being ineffective or losing his name or status in the world, then I'm worshiping a very little God. If you have to worry about your God being protected by you or kept by you, you're worshiping the wrong God. Now, how does this relate to our life? Let's go ahead and read some more and then we'll see. When they heard this, they were enraged and were crying out, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." So the city was filled with the confusion. And they rushed together into the theater, dragging with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's companions in travel. One more time. But when Paul wished to go in among the crowd, the disciples would not let him. We got to stop right there for a second. Because when you see word like the word theater, you're thinking like AMC over here, like the place where you go watch some movies. That's not what we're talking about. The theater that they were crowded into, causing these big disturbances, held about 25,000 people. And it was packed. Right? It's like going to church at ACC. Right? I mean, it's like packed. Or Andy Stanley's church. I mean, it's like 25,000 people in one room. And Paul, and these are people that are mad at Paul. And here's Paul. I think I'm going to go inside. I think I need to just go talk to him. And his buddies obviously have a little bit of influence in Paul's life because they're like, no, Brother Paul, probably not the best bet. Like, number one, you could get lost in there, and chances are they will kill you. And they talk him out of it, so he don't go in there. But here's the weird thing. Let's go ahead and read a couple more verses. And, wait, no, back up. All right. They wouldn't let him. And even some of the Asiarchs, which these are actually people that are in charge in the province of Asia, probably like political leaders, who were friends of his, sent to him and were urging him not to venture into the theater. So there's a lot of people saying, Paul, it's not a good idea. Don't go. Right? Now, some cried out one thing, some another, which that's typical in an assembly of people. For the assembly was in confusion, and most of them did not know why they had come together. Isn't that funny? Like, if you have any question what we're doing here today, please raise your hand. And if you ever find yourself in a big, very large meeting and you don't know why you're there, please find a way to leave. Because that just doesn't even sound good. These people don't even know why they're there. I'm just so, well, here, I don't know. Good popcorn. Some of the crowd prompted Alexander, whom the Jews had put forward, and Alexander, motioning with his hand, wanted to make a defense to the crowd. So, okay, Alexander's in position to talk. Like, we're going to keep Paul out of here because we know Paul's going to get him upset. Maybe Alexander can do something here. So, next verse. But when they recognized that he was a Jew, for about 2 hours they all cried out with one voice, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." And when the town clerk had quieted the crowd, He said, men of Ephesus, who is there who does not know that the city of the Ephesians is the temple keeper of the great Artemis, and of the sacred stone that fell from the sky? Seeing then that these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rash. Listen to this for a second. Not only was this place compared to what, like the Taj Mahal, but you realize, like, we didn't have NASA back then. Like, we didn't have a lot of technology that you would know when a meteorite hit that it was a meteorite. But what they did is they carved a statue for Diana out of a meteorite. Like, a meteorite landed, and the temple was built around that place with Diana carved out of the meteor. Pretty crazy. But it's also kind of cool historically, culturally. This rock that fell from the sky was a meteor, and they carved all this stuff out. So it was a real special, they called it a holy place. But you know what it was? It was still a rock. Like, was it a special rock? Kind of cute. Not sure it wasn't radioactive. They had no way to track it. I mean, could have maybe or maybe not been safe. But they go to chipping away at it thinking it's this special thing. But at the end of the day, it was just a rock. Let's go to the next verse. We are trucking on along. For you have brought these men here who are neither sacrilegious nor blasphemers of our goddess. And if therefore Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against anyone, the courts are open. And they're proconsuls. So let them bring charges against one another. But if you seek anything further, it shall be settled in the regular assembly. For we really are in danger of being charged with rioting today, since there is no cause that we can give to justify this commotion. When he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. So, our question, mine and your question, is this. Yeah, we've read a lot of text, but I wanted you to see something. All this arguing, you have this one guy that shows up in the yearbook named Demetrius. He's pretty much in charge of all this little building of idols and little miniature gods or whatever, so that people can keep in their house trinkets to worship. Okay, he's in trouble. He's freaking out because now this gospel, this way has come in, and they're giving this different news that you don't need these little trinkets, and actually these trinkets aren't good to have, so business is going down. He stirs up a big group because behind all this, at a little higher altitude, you can see the temple of Diana there, and they're like, whoa, this is not just going to affect the trade of these little miniature gods, this is going to affect the big picture in Ephesus, because people will no longer travel here. We're not going to be a college town kind of feel anymore, where people hop in just to see the temple. We're going to lose a lot. And really, Paul is not arguing any of those points. He's just saying there's a better way. Because had anybody went to a high enough altitude and thought enough about what they were doing, they would have said, man, we've been doing this all wrong. Because it's easy for us to look back on a group of people that were in the early 1st century AD and talked about their mistakes of idol worship. But what is an idol? An idol can be anything. If there is something in your life or in my life that gets most of my attention, most of my energy, most of my resources, that thing is an idol. If it's not God, it's an idol. Now, let me ask you this. Everybody that has one, take out your cell phones. Take out your cell phones. Okay, I mean, if you, it's not a trick question. I know, that's kind of, but everybody take out your cell phones that have a cell phone and hold them in the air. Okay, now, Wes, would you get a box and go down through there and collect everybody's cell phone? Oh, what's wrong? Y'all don't trust me?
Yeah, you can have it.
There you go. Now, one saved person in the group. Look, Mo, if somebody comes and tells you, if God tells you, give me that cell phone, what are you going to say? Man, he wouldn't ask that. Right? Let me ask you this. Who created who? I want you to pay attention to what I just said. Because we do that a lot with God. When a scenario comes across our table that is like, if God asked you to give this up to keep him, your first response is, God would never do that. All of a sudden, we've become smarter than God. So who created who? Because a lot of us live life the same way Demetrius did. We think we've created a God that serves us. But God, he wasn't created by us. Like, you can't even see him. And unless you trust him, you can't please him. You understand that? Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Okay, so here, this is something we really got to get. So if God asks you to leave something, give something up, walk away from something with the benefit of keeping him, and you have any question, that's an idol. And that's hard. But God's a lot smarter than I am. Here's what I see. And this is actually, y'all going to be happy today. This is not going to take as long as I normally would preaching. So I doubt that. But we did read a lot of text, right? But I want to show you something that I read in this text about idols in our life. And I hope by now you've begun to even think what might be some idols in your life. Because that's where we got to get. It's the things, and nobody likes to say this because we're in church, right? Nobody wants to talk about what's more important in my life than God. Because we would all say, nothing. But we would just act like there was things that are more important than God. So basically what we're doing in that is we're practicing practical atheism. If God is not the most important thing, and we say he is, then we're just practicing the opposite of who we say we are. I'm just a hypocrite, a practical atheist. So watch this. First thing, the first guy that gets ticked was this guy Demetrius. And he kind of gets mad because Paul made a statement. Gods made with hands are not God's. But let me ask you this, and look all through your life. And if you're not comfortable doing that, that stings too much, just look through your neighbor's life. That's what we do in church anyway, right? I mean, well, he was really talking to you today. Right? It's easier to process what's wrong with you because you sit next to me. Why would I even think about what's wrong with me? But look, don't idols promise a better life? I mean, back then they did. Today they do. See, I was kidding about the cell phone, but you know, nobody passed one over to Wes. And You go through phases. I think some people, I don't know, Netflix, football. We got so many things down here in the South. It's pitiful. Like, if you're not a super football fan, if it's football, get ready. Come by September. I mean, there has to be so many altar calls in Auburn. Because I'm telling you, you can see where the true worship happens. It's in Jordan Hare. No, I'm just kidding. But there's some truth to it. People that still love the Lord, as long as it don't get in the way of football. I got to get off people's toes. It's SEC bunch, man. You can't preach anywhere in the South about SEC football. Somebody will key your car. Yeah. So if you're getting any ideas, there's a dark colored Armada out there. That's what I drive. Don't tell Dave I said that. Okay, but idols do promise a better life. And they promise a better life outside of God. Did y'all hear that? Do I need to say that again? Outside of God. Because what is it trying to do? It's trying to pull you away from your worship and fellowship with God. That's how it happens, and it's a really tricky thing. It started in the garden. I mean, and it's like, hey, did God really say? You won't really die. You know what I'm saying? But really what they were doing, the whole trick of the enemy was to get them out of the presence of God. They didn't realize, or the enemy didn't realize just how smart God was. That, yeah, he was going to kick them out of the garden. But yes, he was going to go with them. So, see, you never outsmart God. Sometimes we just outsmart ourselves by trying to play God. So I want you to check this out. Idols promise a better life, happiness, good retirement, 401k, all that kind of stuff. These things aren't bad. But where it's taking you is the key to everything. Because higher altitude, you get to see the trajectory where you're headed. From down here on earth, walking around, 0 altitude, like we're just operating from one circumstance to another. Dude, you just don't realize I ain't got enough paycheck to last me till the next time one comes around. That's how I just got sick, I got to go to the doctor. We operate in circumstances down here, but when you can draw up to a higher altitude and begin to see the path you're going on, whoa, sometimes that gets frightening. Sometimes it's very encouraging. Because all the time, as a child of God, he is drawing us closer to him. That's the purpose. Closer to him, that's where fruit happens. If you abide in me and I in you, you'll bear much fruit. And that's the thing, but idols promise life and happiness, but only God can deliver. I want to show you this. If I can find it, Lord, y'all just be patient with me. If somebody can turn to it, y'all find it before I do, we'll chop it up and let you read it. Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2. Some of y'all Bible students up back there should be real quick on this stuff. All right, I'm going to have to read it myself, I guess. Jeremiah chapter 2. It's on page 635. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and they have hewn out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Now, isn't that like us, though? We want to get a formula and a plan, and then once we get that formula and plan together, we're going to go ahead and make it happen. We don't realize that in the process of doing this, we have inched God out of the equation. He promised them living water. Living water meant they didn't have to have a cistern. They didn't have to have a way to connect it. You just walk up, stick your head up, and drink from the waterfalls of grace. That's living water. But no, we go and try to build bowls and things to keep the water and all this stuff. And in our building, we build a bunch of cracked bowls. So 2 evils. And that happens all the time in idolatry, because anything that we're dealing with that's an idol in our life is, number one, our own efforts that are broken. Do you understand what I'm saying there? Our own efforts to do something without needing God, and that breaks every time. And if you've walked the walk of falling and failing every now and then, you'll see that. Every time that you fall, or I fall, it happens one way. I know when I fall whose hand I'm not holding.
That's right.
I have never fallen holding Jesus' hand.
That's right.
And you haven't either.
That's right. I can agree.
Amen, buddy. But Jesus promises life. And life more abundant. And when Jesus says it, he will make it happen. Okay? Notice in the text that these idols needed protecting. Did y'all notice that? Like, everybody seems to be defending these idols. We're not going to have enough. Oh, and then you get to Diana, Artemis, whatever. I mean, everybody just feels like they've got to protect these idols. Do you know what you don't have to do with God? Protect him. As a matter of fact, he don't even worry about it, because you don't have to protect him. He will protect you in ways you can't even imagine. But here's the thing about idols. Idols promise life and happiness. They promise, or they actually need protecting, and they require sacrifice. God gives life, and that more abundantly. He doesn't need protecting. He protects us. And he doesn't need sacrifice. Because when a sacrifice was required, and he had dealt with our sacrifices for thousands of years, and you know what he said? I don't even like it. I mean, when it gets to the point that festivals that God had established for his people, when God says your festivals and your sacrifices, I detest them. He's tired of us honing out these cisterns, because we've made things detestable to him when he says, okay, I don't need a sacrifice. I'm going to be one. So I'm going to send me in the flesh as my son, injected through a people that I've protected. And my son is going to be born on the earth as a man who broke this thing. So I'm going to become the sacrifice. So God doesn't need anything. He don't need your protecting, and he doesn't need a sacrifice. When it came time for a sacrifice, he said, I'll just send one. And he did. And that sacrifice was a propitiation for all mankind. A total satisfaction sacrifice. So what Paul really got, that we really need to get, is we need to search things. And we need to be more mindful of the things we ask God for. Like, instead of asking him for things in our life to bring more stuff, how about asking him if we have the right stuff in our life now? Because there's probably some stuff that really we make more important than him in our life now. And the better question is, God, search my heart, search my stuff, do an inventory, and tell me what needs to stay and what needs to go. And I'm going to tell you what, that's just where the work starts. Because God, contrary to popular belief, God will tell you to remove things in your life that aren't for your purpose. He doesn't waste time on things that are sideways energy to you and your purpose, me and my purpose. So sometimes he will tell you, let go of something that you don't want to let go of. And what do you do there? I guess you decide when you fall, whose hand you want to be holding. Because I know if you could go way back when and ask Demetrius and these guys in this story, when you fail, Demetrius, oh mighty Demetrius, when you fail, I know you weren't holding Jesus' hand. How'd that work out? One of those little Diana trinkets. Because you don't want to be holding an idol when you fall. You want to be holding the hand of Jesus. And he's going to ask, son, daughter, it's not that I don't love you. It's the reason I'm asking you to let this go is because I love you. Amen. Because I'm trying to take you somewhere, and I know you're going to make mistakes, but I'm here. I left the garden with Adam and Eve. I followed them the whole time. I followed my people throughout history. And then sent my son as a sacrifice to pay for what they were trying to do all these years. It works. Just let me have a little more control. Don't hold things so tightly. Because God, I don't know if God would say this. I'm half the time I don't want to say God wouldn't say that, but I do know that I've seen in my personal life that God will ask for something in your hand, and it's best to give it to him, because he's going to get it. And if he has to break your hand to get something out of it that's going to kill you, he will. I want to do two things. We read a lot of scripture. I think we've covered a lot of ground. This is mostly internal for us. And this is something I hope we can process. And this is something I normally don't do. I want to read a quote by Tim Keller. And I want you to sit just for a moment, quietly, and think where things are. We're going to play a video, and we'll be down here if somebody needs prayer.